Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, an absolute bombshell from the United Nations as they fire a full-scale artillery barrage of judgment at India over the case of Jagtar Singh Johal. Even if India ignores it, it now has a massive legal implication for the Khalistan movement. And talking of bombshells and the Khalistan movement, Amritpal Singh is now being lined up as a candidate for Chief Minister of Punjab next year. Well, if he pulls that one off, then Delhi really is in serious trouble. More on that in a moment. And as the World Sikh Organisation releases its huge report on Anti-Sikh Hate Crime, we pick out the interesting parts so you don't need to read it in detail and see how it sits in relation to the situation in other diaspora countries. All this and more on today's show, and of course we'll take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, which have been filling up beneath the video, so thank you as always to our wonderful loyal audience for that. Right, lots to get through this morning. Let's start, of course, with this interesting story of the World Sikh Organisation's Hate Crime Report in Canada. Now, it's a huge report, as I say. We've been through it in detail. There you go, but it just goes on for 78 pages or so, pages and pages and pages. But ultimately, you'll be delighted to know I've gone through it myself and hopefully extracted the sort of the more relevant, more important, interesting parts, as I said in the introduction. It is an important document. Well done to the World Sikh Organisation. Huge report, huge amount of research. And it really reflects what the diaspora have probably obviously been feeling about the rising hostility and really the trend in rising hate crimes that I've talked about quite regularly on the show. And so the WSO released this landmark report titled "Understanding and Addressing Anti-Sikh Hate Crime in Anecdotes" in Canada. It's not just a collection of anecdotes; it's a proper, comprehensive analysis based on surveys from over 1,600 Sikh Canadians and nationwide town halls. And the findings, well, they're predictable. I think if you're in the community, I think you could probably understand and predict what the findings are, but there still are some surprises in there. It is a bit of a wake-up call for anyone who believes that multiculturalism is protecting the Sikh community in Canada. Well, clearly not. So here are the key findings. I mean, you can freeze frame and have a look at it in detail if you really want, but the numbers really speak for themselves. Over 80% of respondents felt that hate and discrimination against Sikhs has increased in just the last 5 years. 80%. That's 8 out of 10 of you walk past in Surrey, Brampton, Calgary, wherever, and feel less safe today than you did in 2020. That's quite concerning. There's a specific target, clearly, on the backs of those who choose to live as Amritdari or visibly identifiable Sikhs, and that is not a good thing. The report found that a staggering 91% of Sikhs wearing a dastar or other articles of faith reported being targeted. So it's not just a random bias, it's a direct assault on, essentially, the right to exist as a Sikh in a public place. And what's even more disturbing is the reporting gap. Now, again, I'll talk about how this report reflects other diaspora areas. But the data shows that over 70% of victims, that's 7 out of 10, choose not to report these accidents or these incidents to the authorities. Why? Well, because they feel it's futile. What's the point? They fear retaliation. Or they simply just don't trust the institutions. They don't trust the state to protect them. So this means the official police statistics that you're seeing on the news is just the tip of the iceberg. And that is really a cause for concern. So the report also highlights how, and this is quite an important nuance to this, it's how the hate is being normalised. 65% of participants reported verbal harassment, that's name-calling, slurs, whatever. The fact that it becomes so common that some victims told the WSO they didn't even think it was important enough to mention. So that is a huge statistic and hugely important because that, when I say it's being normalised, this is essentially how a community's spirit is destroyed. It's eroded just through 1,000 small cuts of daily discrimination. It becomes so normalised, well, it's normal, isn't it? Why report it? And interestingly, and this is very specific to Canada, and particularly Quebec, the situation is even worse. The WSO found that French-speaking Sikhs in Quebec were far more likely to report hate, 89%, compared to 65% across the rest of Canada. So despite the government's narrative that integration through language is the key to acceptance, the data shows that for Sikhs, linguistic integration often actually makes you more visible as a target for harassment in 2 languages. So again, it's, what on earth? This is a little extract I pulled out. This is really the bigger picture stuff. And the report doesn't really shy away from, of course, the political dimension. Over half of the respondents who answered on this topic, that's 54%, reported experiencing hate specifically because of their political beliefs or their support for Sikh sovereignty, or Khalistan. And this proves that the stigmatisation of Sikh Khalistanis' political identity isn't just a diplomatic issue between, Carney in Ottawa, Modi in Delhi. It's a manifestation, it's a real-world hate against Khalistanis on the streets of Canada. So this is important. Again, there is a specific hate crime against Khalistanis. I'll come on to the important reasons why in a short while. And so, okay, ultimately this is the data, this is the information, this is the what. So we need to look at the why. As I said, why is this happening? Why are Khalistanis, for example, specifically being targeted? I want to do a bit of a deeper dive, a bit of a more intelligent analysis, let's call it, of what we're looking at. So we're going to look at how domestic xenophobia in Canada, and not just Canada, but the West as a whole, is now being weaponized by foreign disinformation to create this perfect storm of anti-Sikh sentiment. So why is a community that's been part of Canada's society, Canada's fabric for over 120 years, and that's an important point again, because when we talk about these right-wing extremists, which we have done in Canada recently, Sikhs are just as Canadian as anybody else in Canada because they've been there for 120 years or more. So why is that community, this 120-year-old community, suddenly facing these huge rises in hate? And not just in Canada, but actually, of course, globally. But particularly an 80% increase in hostility in Canada. Well, the WSO report provides a pretty sophisticated answer. It's done its own analysis. It basically concludes that Sikhs have been caught in a war that's being fought on 2 fronts. And again, this war, that I've called it a war, I've talked regularly myself about these 2 fronts of the war. It is essentially, it's a collusion, an alliance between domestic Western xenophobia and foreign state-backed disinformation. Again, it's this pincer movement I've sort of talked about and referred to in the past. So let's look at this first front, domestic racism, homegrown xenophobia. So the report identifies that anti-Sikh hate is deeply rooted in long-standing systemic racism, colonial ideologies and white supremacist attitudes. That's a lot of big words, basically, to say it's good old-fashioned white supremacist racism. But it's evolving. In the current economic climate, Sikhs, and particularly new arrivals into Canada, and international students, for example, they're being used as scapegoats. They're finding themselves being blamed for systemic failures like housing shortages, unemployment, these socio-economic factors that people are looking for. Who can we blame for it? I need to vent my anger. So we're seeing the racialisation also of the Sikh identity. It doesn't matter if you're 3rd generation, Canadian professional, or even just a new arrival student. If you wear a dastar, you're basically one of them. You're one of the others, You immediately stick out. So the report notes that anti-Sikh hate reinforces a dangerous narrative that Canada is a white nation, even feeding into the toxic Great Replacement conspiracy theory. Again, this is something we've talked about in the past. And the story does get more nuanced, more complex, and even more sinister. This is the second front. The first front is, as I say, the homegrown domestic xenophobia, just good old-fashioned simple racism. But the second front is referred to in this report, transnational repression. Again, we talk about it too regularly. This extract I've just highlighted here. a sustained disinformation campaign with much of it originating from actors aligned with the Indian state, seeking to delegitimise Sikh activism and framing it as Khalistani extremism. So here we are again. Regular viewers will be very familiar with this concept. Obviously, it's what we've been highlighting for years on this channel. Indian state narratives are being imported into the Canadian public consciousness by constantly equating Sikh with extremist, with Khalistan with terrorism. Again, how often have I trotted out the propaganda? It's these Khalistani terrorists everywhere. Khalistani terrorists. It's these terrorists. These, what the report refers to as foreign actors, obviously we know who, are giving domestic racists in Canada, homegrown Canadian racists, a moral excuse to target the Khalistan and the Sikh community. It's helping them justify their hate crimes. They've basically turned Sikhs' political aspirations into a target on their backs. So the report highlights a few examples, and one particular terrifying example from November 2024, where pro-India Hindutva nationalist mobs gathered at a mandir in Brampton. And the report notes that a resident was attacked simply because the mob assumed he supported Khalistan. This is foreign interference manifesting as street violence in Canadian streets. And it's not just about hurt feelings, it's more serious than that. So the report links this climate of hate to a direct assault on constitutional rights. So 54% of Sikhs said they were targeted for their political beliefs. That in itself is horrendous. It's shocking. This is a democratic nation, don't forget. So 54% of Sikhs believe claim they're being targeted for their political beliefs. It means that their right to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, basically the cornerstones of living in a democracy, are being oppressed. If you're afraid to speak about your identity or your politics because you might be attacked or profiled or worse, you are not truly free. You're not living in a genuine democracy. And, this is why the Canadian government needs to do a large degree of introspection, looking at itself, and saying, what are we doing wrong here? They won't, of course. But the analytical conclusion that we've got to draw from all this, anti-Sikh hate is not just about ignorant individuals. It's more than that, and it's worse than that, and it's more, as I say, sinister is the right word. It's a coordinated effort where domestic xenophobia provides the fuel, but foreign disinformation is providing that spark. It's foreign disinformation that's really fueling or setting that fuel alight. It's a failure, basically, of the Canadian multicultural model. It's not protecting its citizens. It's not protecting Canadian citizens, its own citizens, from internal prejudice, but just as importantly, external state-sponsored harassment. It's not protecting its own citizens from the threat within and the threat without, which in itself is a failure of the Carney government. And then finally, we're going to talk about the Carney government, the institutional silence over this. The report notes that this hate goes unchallenged, quote, and unresolved. Because basically, Sikh institutions don't even have a formal definition for anti-Sikh... not Sikh institutions. The state institutions do not have any formal definition for anti-Sikh hate crime. Again, a topic we've had to cover too regularly. Basically, because of this, because they don't have a specifically identifiable anti-Sikh hate crime that's defined in law and defined, by the state, it means the state is basically flying blind whilst the community is being targeted. The state is not officially aware of it. So I'm now going to talk about scaling this up to the rest of the diaspora and how this report compares to what's going in the rest of the diaspora, the similarities, and of course then the initiatives. Okay, what can we do about this? Well, and again, I've reported quite recently a lot on this. It's what's happening in Canada obviously isn't happening in a vacuum. And we look at the rest of the Five Eyes nations, which I did in great detail in one of my earlier shows. So do watch, go back and look at one of the earlier shows. In the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, etc., the pattern, it's identical. That's interesting. The fact that it is identical across all these diaspora nations. The diaspora is facing, therefore, a synchronized surge in hostility. In other words, it's not just happening by accident. So in the United Kingdom, for example, this report, which again I've looked at in great detail in the past, it was just released actually in January. It reveals a unique fear within the UK community at levels not seen for decades. Nearly half of British Sikhs, 49%, are now actively concerned about rising anti-Sikh hate sentiment, just like Canada. And interesting, the percentages are not dissimilar. And again, the report reports to two main culprits: far-right rhetoric, domestic xenophobia, and crucially, geopolitical tensions involving India. Again, it's almost parallel. It mirrors the Canadian report. 54% of British Sikhs believe the community is being misunderstood or targeted because of narratives coming out of Delhi. And this confirms exactly what the WSO found in Canada. In other words, it is a globalised smear campaign that's having real-world consequences in London, Birmingham, here in the UK, and likewise in Canada. And this is why, this is no conspiracy theory. This is why, when you join all these dots across the diaspora, and people like Mark Carney need to wake the F up and say, this is happening, this is real. This is not just us painting ourselves as in some conspiracy, that we're victims in a conspiracy. This is real world evidence, as evidenced by the WSO report in Canada, by this report here in the UK, exactly the same conclusions, the same evidence. United States, again, I reported on this in great detail. The FBI data, which is equally staggering. It shows anti-Sikh hate crime has surged by 3,700% over the last decade. So we've gone from 6 cases in 2015 to 228 last year. And the Sikh coalition in the States confirmed that Sikhs are now the third most targeted religious group in America, behind Jews and Muslims. And just like in Canada and the UK, experts note that these crimes are being driven by concentrated spikes. That's moments where social narratives and political misinformation about Sikhs are really ramped up online. So, as I said, it paints an almost identical picture. And it's the same in Australia, New Zealand, and actually in Europe, etc. The conclusions are the same. The reasons why are the same. And one of those key reasons why is, of course, the reporting gap and the tracking gap. So here in the UK, Home Office data often fails to track Sikh ethnicity properly. In other words, the Sikh community here in the UK is invisible in the statistics. In fact, one of our commenters talks about this. Stay for the comments, because one of our comments talks about this same thing here in the UK. In the US, the FBI only recently started tracking Sikhs as a separate category. And actually, that is one of the reasons why that hate crime has risen. It's not the only reason, but it does explain why there's so few cases 10 years ago. It's because they didn't track it. And of course, in Canada, as the WSO report proves, 70% of you aren't even reporting incidents because you don't think the system cares. So whether you're in London, Surrey, Stockton, California, the machinery of hate is the same. It's just a mixture. It's the same old mixture of old school Western white racism. And ironically, it's not even just whites, actually. But it's good old-fashioned racism and new age transnational repression from India. The diaspora is basically being squeezed from both sides. Again, it's this pincer movement I keep talking about. So, for this final bit on this report, I'm going to talk about now, okay, what are we going to do about it and what is being done about it? Well, of course, the Sikh community, being the Sikh community, doesn't just sit back and let it happen, which I'm delighted to say. So the picture is very clear right across the diaspora. There is a globalised, synchronised, and that's a key word, synchronised surge in anti-Sikh hate sentiment, because that word synchronised implies something, somebody is coordinating it. In other words, it's not just random. It's not just a general random or a social trend just through a myriad of factors. It's something specific that has been coordinating the bulk of this, as we well know. And the story doesn't actually end, fortunately, with Sikhs painting themselves as victims. This is just the beginning of the fight back. What we're seeing actually across the diaspora is a fundamental shift in how the community is organising. And again, this refers back to the Khalistan movement, how the Khalistan movement has been organising itself, has been coordinating itself. And this is part of this multilateral fight back against India. So what we're doing is, so the Sikh community is moving away from simply asking for protection. It's not like you can always look at the Hindu community, this Hindu phobia, we want protection. Hindu phobia, actually, in fact, they're not asking for protection, they don't need it, they know they don't need it. That's more of a PR, an anti-Khalistan movement. But the Sikh community is not just asking for protection. It would be nice, yes please, we want that protection as a community, but as always, and again, this is such a common theme that comes out in all the stories I talk about in the community, is Sikhs realise the state's never going to actually stand up and protect it. So it has to get off its own backside and do it itself. As always, it's always up to Sikhs to do something about the problems. And again, you look at the grooming gangs here in the UK as a prime example of that, where the Sikh community has realised the state isn't going to do anything to protect its children. So the community's had to stand up and do something about it itself. Anyway, that's just one example of many. So in Canada, the World Sikh Organisation, it's not just pointing out the problem. They're actually saying to the government, OK, we've got some solutions for you. So the top recommendation is that the formal federal adoption, obviously, of a legal definition for anti-Sikh hate. Without any definition, you can't have effective training for the police or whatever state bodies. You can't have, of course, accurate tracking. That's the most important part. It's about making the invisible visible. In other words, you can't deal with the problem unless you know that you've got specific evidence that the problem exists, that it is actually there. And it does actually, interestingly, mirror a major legislative push over in the United States. This January, in fact, the Sikh American Anti-Discrimination Act was introduced in Congress. A powerful piece of legislation this. If it passes, it would then create a dedicated Department of Justice task force specifically to tackle anti-Sikh bias and transnational oppression. And this is important. It really is a game changer. It means basically that the FBI, the Department of Justice, would finally have no choice, but they are legally obliged to look at all these crimes through a Sikh-specific lens, rather than just lumping them into some sort of generic other category. So again, it's all about defining what anti-Sikh hate crime is, to create these specific statistics that can then be used as evidence to create new policy. As I say, you can't deal with the problem unless you can actually identify the problem precisely. And then here in the UK, we're seeing all sorts of community-led reporting tools. And here's a couple of examples. Sikh Guard and Raqqa, these two websites where you can actually report these sorts of crimes. And these initiatives understand, of course, the people behind these initiatives clearly understand this reporting gap that I mentioned earlier. And likewise, Sikh Federation UK have been lobbying behind the scenes massively in the all-party parliamentary group, the APPG, lobbying our own MPs here in the UK to specifically identify anti-Sikh hate crimes, to recognise Sikhophobia, let's call it. And these initiatives, as I say, are there to collect this data. We need this data. In other words, if you're a victim of any of these incidents, these crimes, you must report it. Because unfortunately, like the WSO report, where a huge percentage said, well, what's the point of reporting it? It becomes normalised. In other words, nobody does anything about it because it's just life, isn't it? It doesn't have to be part of life. If you report it, it gets identified as a problem and then something is done about it. They are forced to do something about it. So these websites, for example, give a really good, safe space where Sikhs can report any incidents without having to go to the police, for example. Because, of course, do you trust the police? Clearly, many Sikhs don't, and rightly so, for as many Sikhs have experienced under our police force, bless them. I am a supporter of the police, but unfortunately, for some reason, when it comes to our Sikh community, there seems to be double standards going on. Oh, two-tier policing. That's a whole new rabbit hole, which we won't go down. But the British police have been accused of two-tier policing. Anyway, that's another story. But ultimately, yes, so through these websites, for example, British Sikh can report the crime. So please do use these websites, because every incident that you report adds to that pile of evidence that they cannot then ignore. And you then don't have to go to the police to do it. So it's all about building trust within the community to ensure that the real data, the 70% that usually goes unrecorded, does actually now get logged and then sees the light of day. But ultimately, we've got to be real about this. Legislation and reporting apps are only part of a bigger solution that we need. The underlying trend across the diaspora is a growing realisation that Sikhs' safety is all about sovereignty. Ultimately, that's really what it's all about. The WSO report explicitly notes that Sikhs' political activism is now being used as a weapon against Sikhs. As long as Sikh identity is defined by foreign states, therefore, or just seen through the lens of Western integration, Sikhs will always remain vulnerable. The rise in hate crime, it's a symptom of a bigger thing, of a deeper struggle. It's the friction caused by a community that's growing in confidence, growing in political voice, and refusing to be silenced by this disinformation. So, right across the diaspora, the message is the same. Sikhs see the hate. Sikhs are now collecting the data, and no longer are Sikhs waiting for permission to protect their own. So, in other words, the only solution ultimately, Sikhs are rising up to protect themselves, but what it really should all be about is ultimately we're never going to be safe in our diaspora societies because of how we stand out. Unfortunately, you can't beat human nature, those who are on the extremes of our society, as soon as they see somebody different, just feel compelled to turn on them. So this is never going to end until we have Khalistan, when people can actually return to their homeland and be free of this problem that ultimately is never totally going to go away. Let's move on. Here's an interesting story. This is a big one. This is... this came out a few days ago. This was very, very significant. 8 years, 3,090 days, I think it is today, to be precise. Jagtar Singh Johal, has been held in a cycle of zombie cases and endless hearings in India. Yes, a story we talk too regularly about. But this week, a massive development exploded out of Geneva. A coalition of 10 United Nations independent experts, including the Special Rapporteur on Torture, issued a really powerful joint statement. They didn't just call for Jaggi's release. They've actually, in the statement, said his treatment is psychological torture. That actually is really significant language from the UN. So, just look at their language in detail. It's not just a suggestion. This isn't just a sort of a peripheral report, whatever. It's a clinical dissection of India's broken legal system. And actually broken is quite an interesting word there, because it implies it worked in the first place. It did. Ironically, under the British Empire, love or hate the British Empire, they imposed a legal system that on the whole worked very well. Post-1947, soon as the Brahmins took control of it, the British handed it to the ruling Brahmin upper caste elite of India. They've essentially broken it as now recognised by the United Nations. Look at this quote. 8.5 years of arbitrary detention without a clear path to trial is not justice. It is unlawful suffering. The prolonged uncertainty alone is a form of psychological torture. Key words there: unlawful suffering, not lawful. In other words, India is not a land that follows the rule of law. The experts in this report highlighted what they call a profound miscarriage of justice. And don't forget, in March last year, a year ago, Jaggi was acquitted in one of those 8 cases, or was it 9 cases, against him because there was zero reliable evidence. But he still remains behind bars. Why? Well, we know why. Because the Indian state is using a tactic of what they call multiplication of proceedings. Basically, filing near identical charges based on the same torture-extracted confession to keep him in a loop of what's called, legally termed, double jeopardy. In other words, it's basically been tried for the same crime, not just twice, but 8 times. And this is the outrageous status of this whole thing, is that essentially he's being charged. He's got 8 charges against him, essentially for the same thing. And one of those cases, when it was finally seen by the judge and presided by the judge, he was found not guilty. It was thrown out. There's no evidence. So why then have the remaining cases not just fallen like dominoes, and he should be free now? But this is what the United Nations have said. No, this is unlawful. This is unlawful, is the United Nations words to India. Essentially, they are recognising that he's being deliberately kept in prison with no chance of release. As they say, a loop of double jeopardy. And they say it is psychological torture. It's powerful words. So the question is, of course, well, what are India going to do about it? Is India going to listen? I mean, does a report like this actually matter? Well, India has historically ignored the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, the WGAD, usually every time dismissing their findings as interference. But this is different. It involves 10 different UN mandates simultaneously. There are 10 independent UN rapporteurs who've got together and independently come to the same conclusion. So this is, again, it's not just like some fringe group in the UN who've had nothing better to do. Oh, let's write a report on India. This is a lot more powerful than that. This is a significant report. And for a country like India, which is desperate, I often say how India is trying so hard to sit at the top table. It sees itself as a Vishwaguru, a global leader, a champion of the rule of law. And it uses that because it wants a seat at the top table. It wants to attract, for example, Western investment. It wants to be respected on the global stage. But if you have 10 UN experts label your judicial process as dysfunctional and a source of torture, it's not just a diplomatic stain. It's a damning indictment of your society. It's telling you as a nation you do not belong at the top table. And it also provides the legal ammunition that governments need, and here in the UK under Keir Starmer, who previously supported Jaggi when he was in opposition, it essentially is sending a message to our own Labour government that you've got to finally declare him as a political prisoner and get his return. Again, this is more legal evidence for the Jaggi campaign to go to Starmer and our useless Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper and say, look, now you have to act. Now you've got to stop talking about trade deals and you've got to do something about it, because even the UN special reports say he is being tortured. The word there is torture. That is against international law. It is against British law. Therefore, you have a legal obligation to get him back. But of course, there's a deeper layer here that the mainstream media certainly won't touch on. The Khalistan movement. This is really, really, really important for the Khalistan movement. In other words, the Khalistan movement is as a regular report, is being very intelligent at the moment. They're operating. It's not just all about flags and slogans, although that's a huge part of it, in being visible, getting the message out there. it's operating behind the scenes a very clever, very intelligent, legalistic campaign. Under international law, the territorial integrity of a state is generally protected. This is India's legal protection against the Khalistan movement, because it says it's a threat to our territorial integrity. However, there is this legal principle, and again I've talked about it in the past, remedial secession. And this legal argument is very simple. A state's right to its borders is conditional. It's not absolute. It is conditional. This is the legal... what's the word I'm looking for? This is the legal arrow, for want of a better word. This is the legal weapon that the Khalistan movement is latched onto, recognises. This remedial secession. If a state systematically oppresses a specific group under international law, if it denies them human rights, if it subjects them to arbitrary detention and torture, that state loses its moral and legal right to govern those people. So, by documenting cases like Jaggis through the UN, like reports like this, which now you can start to see how significant this report is, it's building the evidence that India is, in fact, an occupying force. It's not a representative government for the inhabitants of Punjab, for Sikhs. Every day Jaggi spends in arbitrary detention is another piece of evidence in the international legal case for Khalistan. And this is why the Khalistan movement is winning. This is why India actually now are launching these huge waves of transnational repression, of the Hindutva propaganda, etc. As we've all seen, this massive rise in efforts from India to try and paint the Khalistan movement as bad people, as terrorists, etc. Because they realise the Khalistan movement, as now supported by this massive report, they're winning the legal battle. India suddenly is terrified because now we can present this in any international court and say, look, here's the proof that India is not treating Sikhs with the same respect, let's call it, as the rest of India's Hindus, for example. The Sikhs are being deliberately persecuted. Here is the proof. They're being tortured. Key word, tortured. So Jaggi's case is proving India cannot have it both ways. It cannot claim to be a democracy whilst using the tools of a dictatorship. So again, this report on its own is powerful. But when you put it in the context of the legal case of Khalistan, this is a massive pillar, a massive stone in that foundation that the Khalistan movement is building, this legal foundation, to prove that India has no legal defence against Khalistan now. It cannot claim integrity of its own borders as its legal case, because now the UN has just said in very explicit terms, you are oppressing Sikhs in Punjab. You're torturing them. So this is why this is a bombshell. This is massive. Very few people have picked, certainly the mainstream haven't picked up on this, but I can tell you the Khalistan movement have. This is huge. So talking about the Khalistan movement, and again another huge piece of news. Yes, this man, Amritpal Singh, by Amritpal Singh. Wow. This is, again, the news is fairly contained. I had to dig quite deep to get this. It doesn't seem to have sort of filtered much out of Punjab. But again, this is massive. And again, I don't think people have realised outside of Punjab just how big this potentially could be. This is significant. And it really has sent shockwaves, certainly domestically in Punjab, all the way down to Delhi. And for months, there has been some quiet speculation about the long-term ambitions of Amritpal Singh. And he, of course, he's held in this high security cell in Dibrugarh, thousands of miles away, the other side of India, over in Assam. And you might think that his political career was successfully being contained by Delhi. You can't do much from a jail cell in Dibrugarh, even though the fact that he's actually a member of the Lok Sabha, he's a member of parliament. But no, It doesn't stop there with Amritpal Singh. As of yesterday, the strategy actually went public. In fact, it was a couple of days ago, I think it was now. It was yesterday. A massive Panthic gathering in Ludhiana. The leadership of this new, not quite so new now, political party, Akali Dal Waris Punjab Day, officially announced that Amritpal Singh will be their projected chief ministerial face for the 2027 Punjab Assembly elections. It's not just a rumour, it is a formal declaration, and it's actually a formal declaration of political war. And this is again why it's so significant. Now, this gathering yesterday, I haven't got any pictures yet, I haven't found anything yet, but I'll see if I can get something. But it took place at Asha Rani Park in Ludhiana, and it was attended by the party's patron, Bapu Tarsem Singh, that's Amritpal's father, one of the core founders of the party. And again, along with other core senior leadership representatives, including Punjab coordinator Paramjit Singh Johal and senior leader Rajiv Kumar Lovely. What a lovely name. The message from the stage, they all sort of gave their speeches, I gather, and the message was very clear. The community is no longer content with just being represented, it is ready to lead. And during Vaisakhi, Paramjit Singh Johal addressed a crowd then with a powerful indictment of the current state of Punjab. He spoke about the conspiracy of the state and central government to keep Amrit in Dibrugarh jail under this NSA. He pointed out, of course, the glaring judicial hypocrisy. If the NSA had been revoked, which actually technically it has been, apparently, and if any alleged offences occurred in Punjab, then why is the hearing still being conducted via video link from Assam? And this actually is, I talked about this zombie case strategy when we were talking about Jaggi. It's the same sort of strategy. It's basically keeping a man legally shackled, even when the primary justification for his detention has vanished. So in other words, it's perpetual imprisonment. You can never be released. That's what they're trying to do. So why is Amrit and his team pushing for the Chief Minister's office right now? Well, the timing actually is very clever. We're about a year and a half out from those elections towards the end of next year. By naming Amritpal as the face to push for Chief Minister of Punjab next year, the party is doing two very intelligent things. Firstly, it's basically telling the Punjabi voter that the only way to get Amrit out of prison and end this era of gangsterism and drugs, that's just pervasive in Punjab at the moment. The only way that you're ever going to stop that is you've got to give Amritpal Singh the keys to the state. In other words, it's making it necessary. Your only solution is to get Amrit as Chief Minister. So that's one pillar of this idea. And secondly, this term terrorist, this terrorist label that Delhi are trying to smear him with. It's very hard for the Indian state to maintain this narrative that Amrit is a fringe militant, is essentially a terrorist, when firstly he's a democratically elected MP, as he has done with a massive majority, but also a formal candidate for the highest office in the state. You can't label a potential chief minister as a terrorist. Clearly, he cannot be logically a terrorist if he's being elected as a chief minister. It just doesn't wash. That narrative just falls apart. You can't push that narrative. Nobody's going to believe it. It's not credible. So the party leaders, Waris Punjab Day leaders in Ludhiana, were very specific. They didn't just talk about Sikh issues. Again, being astute and shrewd politicians, they talked about the bigger story. They talked about the all-round development of Punjab. They talked about tackling this drug epidemic, the breakdown of law and order under the current regime. They've even clarified that their ideology is not just specific to Sikhs. It's open to everyone, as indeed reflected in the Sikh Empire and Khalistan. In other words, the context is really Khalistan, but ultimately say, look, in Punjab, you're all welcome. We're not just a Sikh-only state. We're definitely not a Hindu-only state. All are welcome. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians. And likewise, they're trying to say that Punjab will be, under Amritpal, cleaned up. It will become a clean state and it will become a lot more prosperous. So basically, it's a sophisticated, inclusive political platform, and it's been deliberately designed to win an election and win a general election, not just a sectarian one. In other words, this isn't just about Sikhs. And this, again, is why they're being intelligent about this. They're trying to have a broader appeal. In other words, but Amrit only has a chance of this if he appeals not just to the Sikh community, but to all people in Punjab. So this is why they're building up the platform. Look, we're going to tackle drugs, we're going to tackle crime, we're going to tackle the failing or the deindustrialisation of Punjab, try and turn that around, etc., etc. And then we need to look at this legend building aspect, because Amritpal has actually become a bit of a legendary figure in many ways. And history has shown us that for the Sikh community particularly, there is no greater political accelerant power than state repression. Every day Amritpal spends in jail, his status as a morcha leader grows. So he's not being framed as a prisoner as such, but he's basically being framed as he's a sovereign in waiting. He's our leader in waiting. And the Ludhiana gathering yesterday proved basically the momentum from that record-breaking election win for Kador Sahib constituency, in which he won nearly 200,000 vote majority without even being physically in the constituency at the time. So that momentum is not just fading, it's evolved into something even more powerful. So the party is basically playing a long game in this. They announced yesterday that an 8-member committee had been formed to coordinate with other like-minded Pan-Sikh organisations to build a united front ready for these elections next year. And if they can consolidate the whole Pan-Sikh vote and add a layer of disillusioned youth, rural voters who are tired of the traditional parties, they actually have a legitimate chance for winning this. Can you imagine, Amritpal being elected from Dibrugarh jail as chief minister? That is going to send a hand grenade into Delhi. And then the legal battle. I'm running out of time, so I need to rush through the rest of this, basically. But basically, there is the Indian state is actually in a bit of a corner in this. If they release him, they're obviously facing a political landslide next year. But if they keep him in jail through essentially arbitrary detention and these video-linked trials, they're basically confirming the United Nations' recent findings. Remember that report I've just talked about? They're basically adding fuel to that report. It's the same torture, the same psychological torture is going on of political prisoners in Assam as well. He's a Sikh. So once again, it's more evidence, more legal evidence to support the Khalistan movement. Every time, so every move even that Delhi makes is only now going to serve to validate the Khalistan movement's argument. The Indian legal system is not a tool of justice, it's a weapon of political suppression. So this is why this story is becoming really, really important. So ultimately, the Warris Punjab Day movement is now evolving into something really, a real threat to Delhi now. This move it's a fantastic chess move, because ultimately they are now helping, from a domestic point, helping a legal and democratic case for Khalistan. So we've got Geneva, the events in Geneva going on, and all the diaspora organisations, and now within Punjab itself, for Delhi, this is the enemy within. This is the domestic, homegrown Khalistan movement locally in India, now just growing. So we'll keep an eye on this, but this, as I say, is absolutely massive. This is, fingers crossed, and we send huge amounts of support to Amritpal's attempt, because if he pulls this off, this could be very, very significant. Okay, let's now move on to our comments column, and thank you, as always, to you guys for your support and your ongoing wonderful contributions. And stay safe. One of our regulars, hi, stay safe. Thank you for this. Yeah, comments disappearing. Your Gmail, Google guidelines, email from some Indian, blah, must be them Indians again. 2 of my comments disappeared. Censoring free speech. It's a bit more than censoring. It's a coordinated campaign. They know what they're up to. We know what they're up to. Loads of you have reported comments disappearing. Don't forget, if your comments disappear and you just cannot get it to appear, message me. Send it to me via email, message@satlugetv.com, and I will read it. And again, if it's worth talking about, I'll definitely talk about it. So email me if your messages are not, if your comments are not appearing on the videos. JJ, they can keep trying. They'll bring Sikhs together. Hopefully this will wake the fools who think they're not affected by Indian government propaganda. Yeah, this is an important point. Apathy, indifference. These are terms I've talked about a lot. One of the other problems, one of the other enemies, let's say, for the Khalistan movement that needs dealing with is just general apathy amongst the Sikh community. Many people in the community just don't care. They've got more. You can't blame them. They've got more important things to worry about. Putting food on the table, keeping a roof over their heads. The Khalistan movement is something distant, far away. It's political. They don't care. And that is a problem. We need to motivate more people to say, look, it does affect you. Whether you like it or not, this what's coming out of India is affecting you, even indirectly, because you as a Sikh are being targeted. Any hate crime that you experience, you might not care about Khalistan, but ultimately you are probably, according to those statistics, you will be targeted because you are a Sikh. And the only solution, ultimately, is Khalistan. So please wake up and support it, because you are being affected, whether you like it or not, by what's coming out of India. So, thank you, JJ, for that. Charming Hope. Yeah, look, instead of getting bitter about anti-migration videos, take them as reminders. And this is a nice metaphor that you use. At night, all birds return to their nests. Sikhs should have their own nest, their own home to return to. Absolutely, and as per the earlier point, yes, indeed. Even if you are indifferent about Khalistan, you shouldn't be, because ultimately that is your genetic home. Khalistan, going back to the Sikh Empire and the times before it, that is ultimately your roots as a Sikh. Khalistan needs to be established because it then provides a homeland, like Israel is for Jews. You only need to look at the Jewish community to see how important Israel is for Jews. They always know, whether you're in Australia, the US, or wherever, every Jew knows they at least have a homeland they can go home to. That nest they fly home to at night. And that is what Sikhs globally need. They need that homeland. Even if they don't live in Khalistan, just knowing it is there means that they always know they have a homeland. They have a home to go to, should they ever choose to. Sahib Jatatwal. Oh, big fan of mine. Thank you. Bless you. Thank you for that. I didn't know I had fans, but I do. So thank you for that. And thank you for your comment. Yes, this provides some interesting background to this guy, Daniel Tyre, who was in that video, that propaganda video that I shared the other day. Interestingly, he's a quarter black Caribbean. Don't forget, this guy is essentially a racist. This guy, if it's the right guy I'm remembering, is the Canadian who's basically saying, get all Sikhs, basically anybody who's not white, out of Canada. He's claiming that he is a Canadian, that the only Canadians, real Canadians, are white, descendants of the white settlers. The original white settlers. If you're not a descendant of the original white settler, you're not a Canadian. You don't belong in Canada. That's his perverted logic. Anyway, thank you for this. Apparently himself, he's a quarter black Caribbean. His father is a black Caribbean immigrant. He's also ignored the past racial laws that happened during the British Empire. He was a chairman of the Canadian People's Party. He's got ties to neo-Nazis, Second Sons of Canada. He's basically a racist, as you say, which makes every non-white race barbaric, savage, makes immigration a horrible thing that's going to lead to the collapse of the Western world, etc., etc. Yeah, now actually, yes, I mean, clearly this guy is just an absolute idiot and is a hypocrite. And, well, just watch my show for a nice rant I had about this guy. He is a complete waste of oxygen, frankly. But interesting there. You see, but again, we've got to be careful here. These two arguments, immigration and racism, they are two very different arguments. They obviously overlap to some degree. And when it comes to far-right idiots and extremists, they cannot differentiate between the two. Interestingly, the left-wing extremists also cannot differentiate between the two. So the two extremes don't have the intelligence, whether you're extreme left or extreme right, don't have the intelligence to understand that they are two different arguments. There is an anti-immigration argument and there is a racist argument. Racism is wrong on all levels. It is sadly inbuilt into human nature to some degree. In all of us, it's just a fact of nature. But it's when it manifests itself in hate and etc. That's when it is deeply wrong, and it's completely unforgivable. It is never a forgivable thing. Anti-immigration is a different argument. And anti-immigration has a legitimate place in public debate, because if there is too much immigration, it creates social problems, as has now been seen across the West. So there is a legitimate debate. It is nothing to do with racism, the genuine debate about immigration. So even many Sikhs, Muslims, so many of our ethnic communities, minorities in our Western nations, even they can be and are anti-immigration, because they know it's not about the colour of people's skin. It's about we need to control our borders. We cannot just open the borders and let too many people in because we can't support them. That's a different argument. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked by that. But ultimately, let's just be very careful with our language here. But yes, ultimately, this whole thing in Canada, it's just pure and simple, old-fashioned racism, which is unforgivable. Amric, Angus G, we've been so far not able to persuade. Oh, this is the comment. Yes, thank you, Amric. This is, again, we're talking about, and I talked at length about the WSO report. Why are we not identifying anti-Sikh hate crime for what it is? Why are we not looking at Sikhs as a specific ethnicity, which we should be? Because we can't do anything about problems unless we identify the specific anti-Sikh hate crimes. As you rightly say, here in the UK, the community has been trying so hard, and in fact it has been. I know the Sikh Federation UK have been working behind the scenes very powerfully with their lobbying in Parliament about it. But ultimately, as you rightly say, Sikhs are generally, here in the UK, lumped into Asians. The labelling is Sikhs, well, they're Asians, aren't they? They're lumped in with Pakistanis, Afghanistan. So what we need is more specific ethnic identities. And again, I covered a story ages ago about when crimes are committed, decreasingly so, the ethnicity of the criminal is being reported. Let me reverse that language. In other words, the ethnicity of criminals now is not being reported, is being reported less and less. In other words, we're hiding what ethnicity the criminal is for clearly a very good reason. We're trying to hide the truth that there is rising crime from, for example, the Pakistani grooming gangs. It's all part of this big cover-up. But anyway, ultimately, we should be labelling Pakistani Muslims, Sikh Pakistani Indians, Hindu Pakistanis, Hindu Indians, etc. Putting them all together, as you say, as Asians, we're still in the dark. This is flying blind, is the phrase I used earlier. So, Amrit, you're absolutely right, and we must keep pushing and campaigning on this, is that we've got to try and identify the Sikh community as an individual, distinct community here in the UK, because it deserves it and it needs it for all the reasons that we've talked at great length about. Amandeep, again, back to the Dominion Society, whatever they call it in Canada. They're going to have, this point is all about, look, they don't care about Sikh women being raped, and they're going to try and cover it up. Like the whole Epstein thing, if they've got the power to do it, they will cover it up. Unless it actually directly affects them, they don't care. And again, it reflects very much the grooming gang scandal. White government here in the UK only cared about the grooming gang scandal, and white politicians and white police only cared about grooming gang scandal, and arguably they don't seem to still, but anyway, when it started being targeted at white girls. But when back in the 70s and the 80s, when it was targeting Sikh girls, and the Sikh community tried to report it, tried to get authorities to wake up, they didn't. They ignored it. It was only when they started attacking white girls that they actually cared about it. And I think, Amandeep, that's basically your point here, is that they don't care. These people don't care. Unless it happens to their own girls, they don't care. Rick, I'm the man. Bless you. Thank you, Rick. You don't ever miss an episode. Well, thank you for your loyal support. Much appreciated. And I'm your favourite person on YouTube. Good heavens. You must have a very low bar, but I do appreciate that. Thank you for that. This comes back to this comment we had from one of our commenters about ordinary Indians being proxies for the Middle East. And again, actually, I haven't had time, but I might this week do a story about this. It's a can of worms, is the English phrase that we use. Once you open it, it just goes. It's massive. So this is why I haven't actually tackled it yet. But basically, is the ordinary Hindu Indian allied with Iranians or the Middle East or who? And in fact, the truth is somewhere in between. It's very complicated. Anyway, we'll come back onto that. But your point here, actually, I really wanted to pick up is, you reckon Mossad trained the Indian Army for 1984 Operation Blue Star? I don't know. I'd never heard that before. Obviously, there's talk about the SAS in the UK providing advice, which allegedly was ignored. But anyway, but I've never heard Mossad being tied to this. And of course, there is, under the Epstein releases, there are links between the Zionists, the extreme right wing in Israel, and of course the Modi government. So was the Gandhi government back in 1984 tied to Mossad? Interesting one. Who knows? Thank you for that. I concur. The Punjab. Thank you. You're basically telling me, just don't worry about it. Ignore it. I think you're right. I do, to be honest. Punjab. You know what I mean. So thank you, I concur. I agree with you. Let's just disregard those messages. I'll probably still bring them up anyway, because it's always fun to have a laugh about it. But ultimately, yes, thank you. Inderpreet Singh. Where's James? Haven't seen or heard of him lately. I hope he's doing fine. Yes, we do indeed. In fact, he does every now and again pop into the comments. So if you're watching, James, hello there. I hope you're well. And do let us know that you're alive and well. So absolutely, you are dearly missed, as indeed our audience like to remind us. Sikh Project, I honestly can't wait for every episode of Angus TV on YouTube. Bless you, thank you. You look forward to it. Another fan, I've got 2 fans, hooray. The content and perspective are amazing. Keep doing what you do. Well, I will, thank you, because I can only do it, as I keep saying, with you guys there. In other words, I need you to keep me going. I need your comments. I need your input. I need your messages. message@satellitv.com. As many of you have been emailing, thank you for your emails. Much appreciated. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your loyalty. It really does mean a lot. And the reason why I sit here on a daily basis is because, firstly, I have a personal passion for Khalistan, because I totally align with the whole concept of it. I think we, as a nation here in Great Britain, have a debt of honour to push for Khalistan, to essentially thank the Sikhs for all their support over the centuries and for what we did back in the 19th century. We owe it to Khalistan. But ultimately, I also sit here because of you guys, because I have now 2 official fans. Might even have enough to have a fan club. I wouldn't indulge myself like that. But ultimately, no, seriously, I do appreciate your support. It is you guys out there who do keep this show going. It's your input, your comments, and your messages that really keep the show going. So thank you. And don't forget, on that point, we are looking for sponsors still. So if you want to sponsor, if you know anybody or a company that wants to sponsor the channel and have your company name or your personal name, whatever, down below in bright lights, almost in virtual neon, let me know. Send me a message. Because yes, we still, don't forget, we are demonetized on YouTube. So it really is a struggle for us to keep going. But we do keep going because we are united by this cause. We are basically fueled by passion and belief that Khalistan is round the corner. Indeed, Blue Rope says the same. We do have faith, sir. One day we will be free from India. You will. Absolutely you will. It is coming. As Sandeep Singh and Mr. 403 says, Khalistan Zindabad. It is coming. It is round the corner. It is, as I said the other day, the sun is on the horizon. The Khalistan sun is rising. It is there. It is peeping up over the horizon. All the stories today point to that fact. The evidence is mounting. The momentum's building. It is coming. Have faith. Keep the faith. So thank you to all of you. Thanks for all your contributions. Must wrap up now because we're way over time as usual. Do keep your comments coming in. Don't forget you can message me directly at message@satellitetv.com if there's something you'd like to bring to my attention, as many of you do. Thank you for that. But we must bring perspectives to a close for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. God willing, I will see you tomorrow.